Hello, everybody. Dr. Unati here, your host. Welcome to Dr. M Health Corner. Today is Friday. It's 12:15 p.m. MST, 2:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 8:15 p.m. South African time. Today is a special day. You know why? I have a long lost friend on the show. Dr. Siki is actually a colleague, a friend. I haven't seen her for over 15 years, but the power, I know, right? But the power of social media is just amazing. We reconnected a few years ago, and here we are. Today, I'm going to shortly here introduce her. Our topic today, I would like you guys to bring your family, basically, your friends, your colleagues, your children. This is a beautiful topic that I feel is misunderstood. So today is going to be a beautiful day where we're going to understand and get clarity on it. So today, our guest is Dr. Siki Gwanya-Mdletye. She is a physician, obviously. She has so much, which I'm going to talk about shortly. But the most important thing that I know is important to her is she's a wife. She's a mother to two beautiful kids. Her husband, Lundi, here, I'm pretty sure he's watching us. And of course, she's done so much in her life. She's done corporate and now back in academics. So basically, she has MBCHB and diploma in mental health and occupational medicine. She's an author. Please check out her book right on the screen. She's changing lives. And of course, right now, she decided to get into residency back again at school. She's doing psychiatry. Welcome, Six.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be on your show, talking with you and your listenership.
Thank you so much, Six. Today, guys, we're talking about personality disorders. And specifically, it's such a broad topic, but today we're going to shorten it and talk about the two, which I think they are very common. We're going to talk about borderline and narcissistic personality disorders. I'm going to let Dr. Sigi take us through this topic. And as you know, in the world, it's probably around 10% of the population that has personality disorders. We have 10 types. Dr. Sigi is going to focus on these two. Dr. Sigi, tell us, what is a personality? Let's start there, because when do we get disordered? Let's understand personality first. I think that's where we probably should start.
Okay, I think that's a good start. Dr. Unati, when you mentioned to me that you'd like to talk about personality disorders, I thought, wow, what a huge topic. And precisely because it is quite prevalent, in the population. And a lot of the time it is quite misunderstood. Yes. We tend to rush to think that to label people with personality disorders. And I think the thinking, both within the medical fraternity and even out there, tends to be that because personality disorders tend to be quite deeply entrenched and sometimes difficult to manage, it tends to be almost like a dismissive kind of title to give to someone. And so we like to hold, to reserve labeling someone with the diagnosis of a personality disorder. So I want to make it clear just from the get-go that the idea here is not really to equip us to label or to diagnose people with personality disorders, but to get a better understanding of people who struggle with personality disorders. And perhaps because, as you say, with personality disorders being prevalent, likelihood is that we do have people around us that may have personality disorders, that may have traits of personality disorders, and it's important that we kind of have a better understanding of the conditions, that we're able to live more peaceably and more adaptively. So I think you asked really about personality. And I always get very intrigued when someone talks about personality and even about assessment of personality, because it's that richness, it's that color that we bring to life. We're all different. We all have different characteristics, different ways in which we in which we interact with the world around us, with people around us. We have different ways that we think, that we process information, different ways that we feel or experience emotion, and different ways that we act. And those different ways tend to be quite characteristic of us, right? And this is the color that I'm talking about, that adds kind of brightness and variation to the way that we are as people. And so we tend to call that personality. There's different ways, obviously, of describing personality. Whether we talk about introversion, extroversion, whether we say someone is bubbly, someone is energetic, or some people are like me, a bit more dull, a bit more, slow and not that vivacious and that sort of thing. So we'll use a lot of different words and terminology to describe personality, but I think we all kind of have a common understanding that there is an enduring way in which someone shows up in life. And that enduring way in which that person shows up, whether it's in how they process information, in how they experience emotions, and in how they think, and in how they act, and that enduring way, however we label it, we tend to call personality, right?
So now, Dr. Six, while you are there, I would like to hear, when do we start saying this understanding your personality is extreme? Why do we start saying, okay, now as you are showing up to the world, why are we intolerant of that personality? Is it expansive the way it is showing up in the manner that is intolerable to us as a society? I would like you to clarify that part, because truly a lot of times we start labeling people, but do we really understand the extreme that would lead to that diagnosis?
So I think the important thing then, or that the important kind of differentiator from whether now we're experiencing someone's personality or where it's actually crossed onto being disordered or personality disorder, comes now with when one is experiencing now that their way of being, in a way either that is extreme or that is deficient. So whether their expression of their personality traits. Remember what I said about, some people tend to be more energetic, some more emotionally labile. When they're happy, they're all up there, and when they're sad, they're way down there, and so forth. When that variation is a bit more extreme, or sometimes when it's deficient and it's very, very kind of rigid or fixed, But then importantly, when it starts to cause challenges, right, in terms of how one adapts to the world around them. So when it's maladaptive, when it consistently causes problems in the way that someone relates to people around them, right? And the thing is now, when we talk of a personality disorder, this is not a case of someone behaving in these either extremes or very narrow way or rigid way over a short period of time. No, with personality disorders, you will trace that this actually has been coming on for a long time. That someone has, from the time they were a teenager, probably from the time they were quite young, have had these rigid ways of responding, or these extreme ways of relating with people around them, and maladaptive. And they tend to be quite frustrating, both for the individual that is struggling with the disorder and for people around them. So typically with someone with a personality disorder, you will pick up from talking with people that they know, with people that interact with them, that consistently everyone around them kind of picks up that this one is a difficult one, and and different ways in which people will describe interaction with that. But the important thing with when you actually call it a personality disorder is that consistently people will say that this person is like this. So whether you're talking to people that a person works with in the workplace, or you're talking to their family, or you're talking, to people that they live with in the community. So this is why, for instance, in assessing people with a personality disorder, we typically don't stick with just the interview with one person, right? We'll rely quite heavily on collateral information that we'll get from people around, because consistently people around you kind of say the same thing about this person. And these ways of being, of feeling, and of doing are an impediment to how you interact with the world around you. You'll find that, for instance, either it's a challenge in the way that someone does their job, in the way that they relate with people around them, whether it's relationships, kind of get into this turmoil in relationships, persistent and repetitive, recurrent turmoil in the way that they relate with people. And this will have been coming on for a very long time and is there in all different aspects of this person's life, right? It's not episodic. It's not, you won't say that, no, for the past couple of months, this person has been strange. Then you're not talking about a personality disorder, right? It's been there, it's persistent, and it's enduring. And it is genuinely a challenge in how this person experiences life and goes through life, right? And on top of that, these ways tend to be quite inflexible, so despite someone being aware that there is something different, man, about me and about how I interact with people, and I don't like it, I'd love to change it, but it just doesn't go away. Typically they'll be aware of the fact that there is something about me that doesn't quite gel with everyone around me. But despite my efforts, I just fall into the same traps, over and over again.
Right. So you know what? That's when I think the sensitivity, the compassion around you comes into play. And hence I said to the viewers, bring your relatives, bring your colleagues, because as Dr. Siki is saying, this is part of who you are. You are not this today and you'll be different next month. Of course, she's going to share with us how to cope, but we need to accept people as they are, because this is a condition that they live with, and it needs people around us or around them to understand. I like that part, that it's not a sporadic thing. This is who they are. This is their being. Thank you so much, Dr. Go ahead.
The other thing then is that their way of being, so their way of being, of feeling, of their way of thinking and their way of doing tends to deviate from, and this is where it becomes a challenge from us, tends to deviate from your sociocultural norms, right? It's not socially acceptable. It's not culturally appropriate sometimes, and it's not what would be the norm or what would be expected of someone. So their responses, aren't your typical kind of response. And this is why they tend to become not the people, but the way that the experience of being around someone with a personality disorder tends to be, quite uncomfortable for those around them, precisely because of that deviation from norms, from social, from cultural, sometimes even religious, from norms around them. So that tends to be quite challenging for people around someone with a personality disorder.
Loved it. Viewers, thank you so much for watching. And actually, this is an exciting part. So like we said, we have many types of personality disorders. And of course, Dr. Siki is going to focus on these two main ones. And I would like her to take a deep dive on the specific. Let's talk about the borderline one, because I think we see a lot of them, and of course, relating with other medical conditions. Do you want to take a deep dive on that, Dr. Siki, and just share with our community here what to look for, and of course, basically, how does a person feel? And of course, you've shared that already.
The experience of living with borderline personality disorder, I think one of the most interesting things of being around a person with borderline personality disorder is how it kind of brings out a certain response to people around them. In psychology, they tend to call it countertransference, but it kind of makes you to feel in a certain kind of way, all right? And those responses tend to literally be elicited by the interaction with the person with borderline personality disorder. And the difference and the important thing about people with borderline personality, so the diagnostic DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of mental disorders, DSM-5, clusters these personality disorders. You said, Dr. Mdletye, that there's a whole lot of them. There's about 10, but the DSM kind of puts them in clusters, right? Now, both the borderline and the narcissistic personality disorders that we talk about today are sort of your cluster B personalities. So it's the personality disorders that tend to arise out of, and I think it's important to have a better understanding of the fact that these personality disorders didn't just fall from the sky, right? A lot of the time, yes, there is, and that's why I usually, when I interact with people, to say what is the biggest mental health intervention that one would kind of vote for. If there was one to choose, I would say it's parenting. Right? Because ultimately, when you look at all of the, particularly the cluster B personality disorders, there's one common thing that tends to be a thread between the cluster B personality disorders, and there tends to be either adverse childhood events or contentious parenting, whether it's a mismatch between the personality, the parents' parenting style and the child's personality, or the absence of a parent figure, or abuse during childhood. So there tends to be a very significant co-occurrence between the cluster B personality types and adversity in childhood. A lot of the time, there's also relational isolation in childhood, whether, there is mental illness in the major caregiver. There's been a lot of studies that look at, the mental health of the mother or the primary caregiver of people who then go on to develop personality disorders. There's been quite a significant and interesting kind of link coming out between mental illness in a mother and then the development of personality disorders, particularly cluster B personality disorders, in an individual as they grow older, right? So because of that, and I'm giving this background, particularly because, we learn our way of relating with the world around us a lot during childhood, right?
Yes.
We learn how to respond to cues that we get from people. We learn also how to show up to the world around us from those interactions in childhood. Psychology calls it the object, right? Calls it the object relations. And there's a lot of object relations theory that kind of tries to explain why we see these kind of behaviors that are consistent in your cluster B personality disorders. And so now with your cluster B personality disorders, particularly with your borderline personality disorder, remember, when someone has grown up with either absence of the primary caregiver or a primary caregiver that's emotionally unavailable, their understanding is that in order to get attention, I need to do extremes. In order to get any kind of, remember, in childhood and particularly in infancy, attention isn't just about attention, isn't just about getting a stage, right? It's about survival. If you don't get the attention of your primary caregiver as a baby, you don't get fed. If you don't get the attention of the primary caregiver, you don't get, changed. Your nappies don't get changed. If you're cold, you won't be warmed. So attention, I know we tend to become dismissive of people with borderline personality disorder, to say that, he's just seeking attention. But ultimately, that attention, when you go back to where did it come from, this was actually about survival, right? for this person. And so when
You know what,
the reason I'm giving
yes, actually, you are right. There's a study here. There's a colleague who actually studied this. And I know in our culture, it's very common to say, leave her. She can cry her lungs out. And apparently, this is a study that shows that, like you are saying, that ignoring your child crying out with that, I'm trying to make him or her survive. I want him to be stoic. It's where the trauma begins. I'm glad you're mentioning that it is on the studies. They ignore it.
Absolutely.
How many mothers? And proud, I've been guilty myself. I have ignored my child at some point. You know what I
mean? Yes. So being emotionally available to the needs of your child is critical in terms of how they grow up to interact with the world around them. I'm giving this background, Dr. Unati. I know it sounds a little bit circumstantial, right? But I'm giving this background because I don't want to just jump into these are the symptoms, because we can easily not understand. We can easily think that, these people are just seeking attention, and this one just loves eyes, right? And in doing that, become incredibly dismissive when they get whether it's self-harming, which is quite common with borderline personality disorder, because they'll have frequent self-harming, and that self-harming is actually, it's coming from far.
Cry for help.
It's a cry for help.
Yes.
It's a cry. I often will discourage, us as medical professionals from saying it's attention seeking, because that makes us to become dismissive. And causes us to not realize the seriousness of the condition. Right. So I think with that kind of background, we can then talk. With borderline personality disorder, you'll have a person that experiences literally life in extremes. So that will have, for instance, within their relationships, will either be madly in love or, and crazy about this person because they are literally God's gift to mankind. And within a very short space of time, this person is the devil's own child, right?
Right.
So they go from extremes. They go from serious extremes. Yeah.
Isn't it sad? Because that's even interacting. Yes, go ahead.
Yep. This again goes back to childhood. Because remember in childhood, when you cried, when a baby cried, wanting to feed from the mother, there's that hunger, which is bad, which is sad, which is not pleasant for the child. And at the same time, they're thinking, I'm feeling terrible and I'm looking at mommy, so mommy is bad. And then mommy gives the breast to breastfeed and mommy is good. And so now they do, in psychology, they call it introjecting, or taking in that good mother figure. At some point, as we grow older, we resolve those crises. I'm not saying they're cast in stone, because these are theories, right? But the theory, goes that as we grow older, with the presence of a caring caregiver that takes care, that is responsive to the needs of the infant, then the infant begins to resolve these crises and begin to understand that there's not good mother and bad mother. There's not good breast and bad breast, because the theory says that the baby is thinking, the mommy's breast is bad when I'm feeling the hunger. And then mommy's breast is bad when I'm, it's good when I'm getting, the milk and I'm feeling happy and comfortable. That is very primitive and very, infantile. It's an infantile response. Now, what the theory says is that in the absence of consistent and loving and nurturing and present good enough parenthood in that time, then you don't get to resolve. You don't get to resolve that. You don't get to develop those kind of good relations and understanding that people can variate, and they don't necessarily are in those extremes. You don't necessarily have terrible and evil and bad and bad breast and good breast. That you can have variation in people, and that is fine, right? So because of those, it's part of life. It's part of life. So because that kind of you can say resolution did not occur in the childhood. They carry this well into their adult life. And unfortunately, then it plays itself out in the way that they relate. You'll see it, Dr. Unati, even in patients that you interact with, that maybe for the first one or two consultations, you are the best doctor. My previous doctor was terrible. My previous doctor did not get me. You absolutely get me. And they sing your praises. They'll even tell people about you to say, you know what, there's this doctor. But don't get disappointed when 2 or 3 consultations down the line, they are suing you, they're becoming litigious, and you're the worst person ever. So those extremes in their interaction with the world around them and with people, particularly in relational interaction. So they'll have those extremes. Frequently, as I mentioned, you'll see the frequent self-harming behavior. And that really is an attempt to resolve these extremes occurring. Sometimes the thing is that they can be quite unpredictable. Sometimes, the self-harming can even be in anticipation of abandonment, because the biggest threat to them is abandonment. Is that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for this relationship, and at some point this person's going to catch me out and leave me. So I better do this to myself before they go. I better slit my wrists. I better do this. I better harm myself ahead of it. And then sometimes it's to avoid that abandonment. Sometimes it's actually even just as an attempt to escape the internal turmoil or the internal conflicts, right? So we'll list all of these. The DSM will list all of these kind of characteristic, personality traits that will exist within someone who has a personality disorder. But ultimately, it kind of revolves around that theme of fearing abandonment and of relational extremes, right? And so it's Dr. similar Siki, with
I actually, you said something amazing about that part of the fear of abandonment and self-harming or hurting yourself. I've asked a lot of my patients, when you do that, are you wanting to die? And they said, no, doc, I'm feeling pain inside me. I'm feeling pain that I'm fearful of this relationship. Like how many times we see people overdosing with pills. And a lot of times there's a conflict, like you were saying. If there's a conflict in a relationship, there's fear of loss, a person would overdose. I know that if I overdose, he's going to come or she's going to come with me to the hospital. So yes, it's an attention.
Yep.
It's not even an attention-seeking behavior per se. It's coming from a place of pain and need. It's sad.
And here's the thing is, sometimes, yes, it will be in response to something, but sometimes it's actually because this relationship is going so well, I know it's going to go bad soon. Right. So I'm going to hurt myself too, you see. So it's that unpredictable. It's that unpredictable, The other thing is also affective instability. So that kind of their expression of emotion tends to be in extremes, right? Sometimes one is extremely affective, is extremely, all over you, kind of like loving you and full on there, and when they're upset, you're gonna know. Because it's just going to be the whole world must know, right?
Yes.
So they have very explosive, tantrums. Kind of that's what common language would call them, right? So all of these. Remember, baby had to cry really loud to get attention.
Loud.
So
really
that affects
loud.
ability. Yes.
And of course, this can bring a lot of depression too. The anxiety, the depression that comes with that, even for the partners. I've had partners getting depressed because of, I don't know how she or he will behave next week. That's hard.
Yep.
Harder for the
that you're bringing in another very interesting aspect, Dr. Unati, because it is not uncommon to find that you will have comorbid mental illness. right? So whilst you have a personality disorder, you can also have actually major depressive disorder with this,
We see it a lot.
so you'll have a treatable mental illness that is now coming alongside the personality disorder, right?
Very
Whereas with your
common.
narcissistic, with your narcissistic personality disorder, now you have someone who is extremely enamored and involved in themselves. It's someone who does not have the ability of seeing the world through someone else's eyes. I've heard it described as a deficiency in empathy. It's someone who just is not empathic, and it's just not in them. They're not able to see the world through. So the world is all about them. And actually, anything that goes right in the world certainly has something to do with them.
With them.
Right?
They achieve. Don't we have a lot of leaders like that? I don't want to be political,
oh, wow.
but we have a lot. Dr. Siki, we have a lot. Yes. And they get undiagnosed. And I've seen that they get undiagnosed because these people are very smart, a lot of them. And unfortunately, the world, the organizations, the corporate uses the meritocracy. This person is amazing. He came from UCT, from Harvard, and we ignore the deficiency and the disorder in them. Isn't it sad? We go along with life.
Absolutely.
And they're not getting any help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, when the thing with relationships in the context of narcissism is that relationships need to feed that kind of need to. The story goes that the guy that the disorder is named after, Narcissus, was apparently looking at himself all the time. He would go to this river, right, and apparently look at his image in this river, sort of as a mirror, and kind of just admire, the amazing, creation that is looking back at him, which is obviously himself. But one thing I found funny in reading that story is how a lady who was so into this guy, Shem, she really liked this guy, and was close by this one time, and he's looking at himself in the mirror, and then he goes, "I love you," and she thinks he's talking to her, and she's like, "Oh yes," totally goes into that, But the thing with narcissistic personality disorder is that they tend, they'll tend to have those kind of people around them that absolutely feed into that, and systematically, not enable relationships that will stand up to that, so the people closest to them kind of feed into that that you are the best thing in the world, and absolutely you do everything right, and that sort of thing. So yes, as you said, it's very common for leaders to find that they are actually quite narcissistic, and unfortunately, in terms of diagnosis and in terms of management, I don't think a lot of people will present to a doctor because
they're too good.
Absolutely.
Why would they come? They are too good. They are too good. And you know what, Dr. Siki, I love the part when you say they tend to attract women or men whom I would say here, a lot of times they also struggling with self-esteem issues. They praise this person. It's the best thing ever happened to them. And a lot of times what we see is people that feel that, oh my gosh, he went for me or she went for me. See how good I am. He or she didn't go for that person. And they feed onto that. And it can be very abusive. That relationship, I would like you to tap on that, because we see a lot of people trapped in relationships with narcissists. Did you get that, Dr. Six? I lost you there. I was saying, I would like you to share about how this
Yes.
relationship now tends to also be toxic. It's a toxic relationship anyways. And now the narcissists, they don't want to be dropped. They don't want to, you'll never divorce or break up with a narcissist. No, share that, Siki, because we see
You don't.
you don't. I see women and men trapped in relationships with narcissists because today they've done so much bad to you. They pull you down. Tomorrow they bring you the best gift. You're going out to Spain to shop, and people get trapped. Can you share that? Because we see this a lot in relationships.
Yeah. The most threatening thing for a person who is narcissistic is for the partner. Is the personal development of the partner. If the partner actually, to keep the relationship working, the partner needs to remain, dependent.
Submissive.
Typically, the pairing is typically you'll have a person with a more dependent kind of personality partnering with the narcissistic, and that's a beautiful partnership because it works both ways, right? The problem is going to arise when the dependent type of personality, who is the partner, begins to become independent or gains a bit of their independence, gains a little bit of insight and starts to develop themselves. Then that is now problematic, right? Here's the problem is that the narcissistic personality will then probably most of the time will try to mobilize people around this dependent personality to paint them, to preempt, to preempt their departure and to paint them in a terrible light to people around. That's why you need to be very careful when someone with a narcissistic personality comes and tells you something bad about someone they were close with, because chances are they are probably retaliating from the rejection. They don't respond very well to rejection. And so in either anticipating the rejection or experiencing the rejection, they will mobilize against you that are standing up to them as a narcissist. And you'll never hear that.
And that's when we see the isolation. That's when we see the isolation. They isolate you from people because you have to sit in that corner. You don't need people that will make you think for yourself. Sit in that little corner so that they can control you. It's so sad, isn't it? Dr. Six, I know we're going to come to an end. How do we help people with personality disorders, specifically borderline and narcissistic personality ones? How do we help them so that they can thrive?
I think one of the most important aspects of coping and helping someone with a personality disorder is when someone gains self-mastery, right? Gets a better understanding of themselves and of their own personality disorder, right? Some of the interventions that have been studied that are quite effective in terms of management of personality disorder. Firstly, let me just put it out there that there's no medication that treats personality disorders, right? There's no quick solutions to personality disorder. Remember, this thing will have taken years, sometimes decades, leading up to the time when you interface and diagnose and kind of recognize what's going on. So even the solution is not going to be a quick and overnight solution. So there's no specific medication that we give for that. We will give medication if there are symptoms. Remember, I said it's quite common to have comorbidity. So if there are symptoms that one is experiencing that are debilitating and are associated with the personality disorder. But in terms of management of the personality disorder, two therapies mainly that have been studied and are known to be quite effective. The first is, in fact, they're not two, they are quite interrelated. Your cognitive behavioral therapy. And the reason that is important is because with CBT, it tends to sort of reverse engineer. So working from the thinking and trying to correct or to understand, first of all, and identify faulty thinking. Faulty thinking is kind of like at the crux of cognitive behavioral therapeutic modalities. And the the second therapeutic modality that's known to be effective was developed by a lady called Marsha Linehan, still alive. Lots of videos online that are quite informative, but it's called Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. In fact, DBT stems from CBT.
Right.
And the key thing about it is they call it radical acceptance, right? So it's to accept and understand. It's the reason it's dialectical is you're dealing in two ways, right? Radical acceptance, accepting and understanding. So gaining an understanding of this is how I am, this is how I show up. And so in understanding that this is how I am, these are my faulty thinkings, these are the characteristics that make me different from other people, that are persistent, and that all the time this is how I am showing up. So you accept that this is who you are, but then also, whilst you radically accept, you also change, right? You also change. And in changing, what you're doing is you're changing the way you are perceiving yourself in your mind, understanding that this is me, beautifully chaotic I am, right? And in being beautifully chaotic, I preempt that I'm probably doing this. I need to second guess my reaction and move from reacting to responding, right? Learning to respond. Self-awareness is at the crux of it, right?
Yes.
So typically what they'll do then in alongside or with dialectical behavioral therapy is precisely that: self-awareness and understanding your own reactions, and changing those reactions from being reactive to being responsive. And sometimes even just learning to ride the wave, the emotional roller coaster. Understand. So that radical acceptance comes with also saying that I understand that my emotions are never just mild. My emotions are huge roller coaster waves. And so teaching you to say, listen, I'm actually just going to ride that wave, right? I'm going to ride the wave. I'm going to give myself time and just absorb the situation. And so one of the interventions that will teach to someone that struggles with personality disorders, for instance, is being present in the moment, right? Is learning and understanding that, okay, I have this roller coaster going on, but okay, let me bring myself back to the here and now. Let me bring myself back to the here and now so that I can actually ride this wave through. And when I step back, I'll understand that actually this situation was not as extreme as I thought it was. I caught myself out. And so you continue going to. So we will teach someone with a personality disorder to second guess yourself and to catch yourself out, when you are reacting.
Right.
Are we still together?
Yes, I kind of lose you sometimes, but it's okay. Most of it's clear. Yes, go ahead, Six.
Okay. Yes. So I think with therapies, and I think one of the strongest sort of messages that I would want to share is the fact that it's actually not hopeless, right? And that's why I was saying in the beginning that we need to guard what we are saying, and guard because remember, because this person is the way they are, they're likely to rub you up the wrong way, even as a professional, right? And once you label to say, this is a cluster B, hopeless, you actually miss a huge opportunity, because there are interventions that are known to be effective, not in curing personality disorder, right? But in actually shifting those maladaptive ways of showing up in the world to become a lot more adaptive, to a point where someone can actually begin to form meaningful relationships and contribute meaningfully to society. And is that not what we want, right?
We do. And like I said, these people, I would like our viewers to understand they are not retarded. we made an example of. These are leaders. These are intelligent people that the societies, the citizens trust them with their rights for them to fight for them and to choose for them. So I really like that part, Six, that really it's a matter of just the self-awareness and understanding yourself. All of us. You remember at school, we used to say, it looks like I also belong to this. We kind of, you can tell that, each one of us has some traits. That's who we are.
Oh, we do. We do.
Yes. I love this. I love it. I know that the signal is kind of on and off, but you know what? This was just lovely, Six. Dr. Siki, I would like you, as we wrap up, what can you share with this community? And of course, share how can they find you? You are quite present on social media. The other thing I want to share with you guys, Dr. Siki is quite present on social media, TikTok, on her Facebook. All she teaches, what I love about what she teaches is the basic things, just going to the basic things. She reminded me, hey, you need to sleep and rest. I'm actually doing your thing. So I would like you to share with us here, what can you share with people who live with these conditions? And of course, the people that have these people around them, what to look, how can they survive all of this, and basically how to find you?
Yeah. So I think that the key message, if anything, today would be that it's not hopeless. It's not a hopeless situation, right? It's not a hopeless situation. You absolutely can find help. It's important that you do identify that there is an issue, that there is a problem, and having identified, to then go and seek help. Your GP is a good place to start in terms of seeking help. If you are fortunate in having access to psychologists, that's always great. And understanding that, it's a process. It's not going to be a quick fix. It's going to be a process, and it's going to be a process that's going to require you to level up. Right? It's easy it's easy to quit and to revert to your old ways of doing things, and ultimately your old ways of doing things have worked to bring you to where you are now, and that's not working, right? And if it's not working, this means then that you actually need to change the way you are doing things, and that is a very courageous thing to do. So it requires a lot of courage on your part, but it is absolutely not hopeless. So seek help. And in doing so, just believe in yourself, because you are good enough. You are here now, and in being here now, in having the courage to level up and say, listen, I don't like the way things are going, then believe in yourself that you can actually overcome and get that mastery, that self-mastery that we were talking about. In terms of finding me on social media, on Facebook, I'm Siki Gwanya-Mdletye, just as it's spelled right there. I dabble on TikTok. I'm quite new to TikTok. It's just been a month. But I've been making those short videos and posting those. We'll see how that goes. It's just an experiment. And as Dr. Unathi said, I am an author, published author. If you look for my name on Amazon, you'll see a book called Healed and Whole. And I've had some really good feedback from that book. So I think it's a good read. You can tell me when you get it, inbox me on Facebook and tell me your experience of reading it.
Dr. Six, thank you so much, my friend. I really enjoyed this, and I love the deep dive, and also more so of giving that background. And also it kind of makes also the people that live around people who have these personality disorders to have a background and understanding, more than anything, compassion. To our viewers here, I'm so grateful you stayed here and listened to this background, because a lot of times we tend to judge people without understanding. And the key thing that I think all of us at some point, something happens to us as young kids, sometimes it can be prolonged traumatic experience that could lead to these disorders. The key thing is, now we are adults, reparenting is a new concept. Just exactly what Dr. Siki was saying. It's our responsibility now as we are adults, because we want to show up to the world. We want to have relationships. We want to be good parents. So reparenting ourselves is the best option. And she said it, there's psychotherapists out there. There's our GPs out there. So really, we need people that will be supportive, and we could have a good experience in life. And again, thank you so much for staying with us. Like Dr. Siki said, she has this beautiful book. Check it out. whole, like it says, healed and whole, right? We can only be whole when we heal. Again, it's just aligning with our topic today. When we understand ourselves better, we relate better, we can actually parent better, and we can also have a good experience in life. Six, I loved this. Thank you so much, sis. I love you.
Thank
I really
you.
enjoyed
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you. And to our viewers, we're coming back here, same time, same place. Take care.